Ho, 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 everybody. Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Review and Preview, the final episode of 2022. My name is Tom Scavetta, joined alongside my co host for the evening, Noah Dog Dibler. Noah, how are you doing tonight?
Doing really good, man. And this is, first of all, everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. It is the season, but this is gonna be a bit of a depressing show, honestly. It's always nice, on other shows I get to talk about the Georgia Bulldogs going undefeated, winning a championship. Get to talk the Braves win the World Series. But sometimes I got to talk about my other team, the Atlanta Falcons, the absolute joke that they are. Haven't won anything for 56 years. And it's not looking good for them again. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the NFC South, a lot of other stuff as well. But I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent, and my team is 8-5-1, a little bit better off this season. But folks,
Mhm.
we have a special guest coming on in any moment. But before we bring him up, make sure to go check us out on all of our social media if you haven't already. It's been scrolling across our ticker. We'll leave it up there for another moment. Leave a like and share the show. Leaving a like will help with the new Facebook algorithm. The show will be seen more in groups. If you leave a like on this podcast, we really appreciate you. And yes, we do wish everyone a happy holidays. And without further ado, let's bring on our guest for the evening, Sean Militello from Off the Dome Sports, huge avid Brian Kelly fan, LSU fan, and most importantly, NFC South New Orleans Saints fan from Off the Dome Sports. Sean, how are you? Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody. I'm doing great here in the okayish state of Louisiana. We always got a great big pot of gumbo cooking down here. Getting ready for the winter festivities, getting down that road. You know, one thing about the Saints season, the one thing that makes me happy, it's a complete sweep against those dirty birds. I'm sorry to rub it in your
Mhm.
face, Noah,
Mhm.
but 2-0. We lost to Tampa, we lost to Carolina, we lost to Tampa twice, but the only division team we beat twice is the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I knew that was coming about 5 minutes into the show because look, it is what it is. The Saints and rivals, they're each other's Saints and Falcons are each other's biggest rival. These are the games you circle on the calendar. Look, even when the Falcons, had terrible seasons, I remember years where I think 2 years we actually managed to sweep the Saints, even though our teams were crap. Especially one of those years, we were like 6-10, but we still somehow swept the Saints. And it's like, you know what? We sucked, but at least we swept them. And so, from the other side, I can see that from Saints fans. I think both our teams are absolutely abysmal, but take what you can get, I guess. The series record is now tied, which is a bit of a joke considering we had like a 20-game lead at some point. Falcons blowing leads like they always do, but yeah, man. Both games are very close, but as usual, he finds some way to blow it once again.
As Sean says, who dat? Who dat? All right. So 21-18, Sean. Andy Dalton found Jawan Johnson twice in the end zone. And Rashid who? Rashid Shaheed. Who is that?
Rashid Rahid, undrafted rookie out of Weber State, I believe. What a gem we have in him. I tell you what, he is a playmaker. Uh, I saw that he's averaging like 22 yards per catch so far. Um, and probably half of those catches he has made this year have been touchdowns,
Mhm.
which which is funny. And he's been a great punt returner as well. We had Deontay Hardy, a guy that was looking great. He was looking like a secret weapon, 5'5" speedster, looking like a wide receiver version of not Deontay, Darren Sproles. But, he gets hurt. He's unhappy with his role, and comes Rahid Shaheed, right? Rahid. I
Yeah.
always get mixed up between his first and last name. So him and Olave are going to be two to be reckoned with for the future for the Saints. And I'm glad you brought up Jawan Johnson. He's been a top 10 tight end this year in the NFL. Top 10. Yes, I said it. So top 5 in fantasy, I believe. Not too sure on that one. You can check. But there's some pieces. We just need to figure it out, and we'll see what happens from here.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
this is just how the Falcons are, man. You know, good old Rasheed Wallace scoring a 70-yard touchdown on us. Most people probably don't know this. One play, and they scored a 70-yard touchdown. This is just how the Falcons
Taysom
defense
Hill
is,
at
man.
quarterback, too.
Yeah, Taysom Hill, whenever he comes in the game, you know he's doing two things. He's either throwing deep or running, and they still can't stop it at all. Juwan Johnson, 7 touchdowns this year. Probably scored about half of those against the Falcons because their defense is just – they can't cover tight ends. But, look, you know, they're doing great. Dalton did what he had to do. Our defense sucks. You know, it is what it is. But season's over. We'll get into that a little bit when we talk about the NFC South. But, yeah, no, a close game. The most Falcons inning ever, you know, I swear in like 5 minutes, I was like, you go from no hope and then they're having that drive and you think, oh, they just converted 4th down. And then he fumbles and it's like, oh my God, this is the most Falcons ending to a game imaginable. Just like pure elation in 1 second. And then they're just like absolutely defeated. And then, of course, the Saints somehow have to fumble on a freaking 4th down where they're trying to quarterback sneak in the game. It's like, oh, you know, maybe we can chuck it deep and, you know, have a shot. Maybe it's pass interference. Nope. Our quarterback runs out of bounds with no time left. It's just typical.
Hey, how about Desmond Ridder? First career NFL start. What did you think, Noah? I know you just mentioned he ran out of bounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
Paul's
was.
stat line, before I get your thoughts, 13-26 for 97 yards. He was sacked 4 times. Sorry, I know it's a little lag on my end. And then 38 rushing yards.
Yeah, I mean, you know, no way to sugarcoat it. Look, I was very happy for him to finally get the start because we know Marcus Mariota isn't the guy. He's a stopgap. He's going to be gone probably after this season, even though he signed a 2-year contract. But for Ritter, look, you know, you got to be honest. It wasn't a good game. And I will say I did respect he came out after the game and there was a quote where he's like, if I had to give a grade for my performance, it's a C- or a D. And I respect that he was able to, you know, take accountability. To be honest, if I had to give him a grade, I'd probably give him a D, maybe a D minus. The offense, there are obviously other things I don't think was his fault. I thought our offensive line against a very respectable Saints front. You know, you can say what you want about the rest of the team, but their defensive line is still great. They absolutely killed us. He was sacked 4 times. Our play calling was very predictable. It was basically just, hey, let's give the ball to Tyler Algier. And credit to him, he absolutely killed the Saints. I mean, he's basically the only reason we were in that game in the 4th quarter, is absolutely pounding them off the field. But for Ritter, I thought because we couldn't protect up front, the play calling was very predictable. A lot of short passes. I mean, you read off the stats there. When you have 26 attempts and you can't even get 100 passing yards, I think it was just very predictable, very one-dimensional. I will say I did like some of his mobility. There were some plays where the Saints broke through and he was able to get away and at least try to look for somebody. But very concerning. A lot of times he threw into coverage where there was just no chance of a completion. A lot of deep passes to the sidelines where there's just he just completely overthrew the guy. You know, it's not like oh he just barely missed a play that's there. There were about 10 plays I'd say at least where there was just absolutely no shot of success. So you could very clearly tell this is a guy that was a 3rd-round rookie making his first career start. He wasn't going to come in and, as hopeful as you were, throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. You can see there's a lot of work for this guy. Do I think he's ready just yet? Probably not. But, I assume they're going to let him play the rest of the year because I don't think Mariota is going to do much better. But yeah, no, not very good. I'm still rooting for the guy, obviously, but you got to criticize when it's due. He did not have a good game at all.
Mike DeSanto saying what's up to you, Sean.
What up? What up? Long time no see.
Noah making his analysis. We're going to get to both your head coaches in a moment, but Sean, where do you think the future holds? Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, a rookie in the draft? What do you think is going to happen under center?
So most likely what's going to happen is, Jameis Winston's under another year under contract, and it's a fairly cheap contract. So it just depends if he wants to stay or not. If he wants to stay, he could be a potential bridge quarterback to a younger quarterback or just a straight backup like we've been using him for Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton, I can see him bring him back next year, but one of them are gonna have to go. Either Jameis is gonna have to go or Andy's gonna have to go. You can't keep both. So what's realistically gonna happen is I see somebody out in the free agency pool. Either that or you're gonna have to draft somebody because we don't have a first round pick. So it's gonna be in the second, third round. You're gonna have somebody like a Desmond Ridder type, like the Falcons were able to get in the third round. So I'm not too sure how feasible that is because this is a team that still wants to win now. They might not appear they want to win now after the performance this season. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, in my personal opinion, I think the Saints need to start fresh. This is an older roster. I want to say this is one of the older teams in the league, top 5. So, I mean, they need to get some fresh faces because one thing, why this defense hasn't been – let's forget about the offense. Let's just think about defense. This is because this is Dennis Allen's bread and butter here. Dennis Allen was a top 5 defense coordinator for the past 3 or 4 years, in my opinion, and his defense hasn't lived up to expectations like years before. A big reason why is because we simply got old. You've seen a lot of big plays missed. Our rushing defense, which was ranked amongst the elites, is absolutely getting destroyed this year. You just see Tyler Algier, the BYU kid, just absolutely – Cordero Patterson always messes us up, So, I mean, not just Atlanta Falcons. I mean, the first game, Cordero Patterson against us was tearing us up. So, I mean, it's not even just the Falcons. We've been struggling against the rushing attack all year. So, it's really hard to say what the Saints are going to do as a team overall for the future. But as far as quarterback, you're either keeping Andy Dalton or Jameis. My guess is going to be Jameis since he's under a contract for another year, and then they're going to go after somebody. Just throwing a name here. It's not a guy I think is listed going to happen, but maybe like Geno Smith, who had a good year, or they're going to go out in the draft. Maybe Hendon Hooker falls to the second because of his ACL. We'll see. Will Levis is getting a lot of pick up in the first round, so you might have a quarterback that falls to the second round. We'll see what happens. But I think either free agency is good or you're going to have to draft somebody in the second round. Jimmy G, a lot of people circle him around us. We'll see.
How about Baker?
I mean, I would absolutely I wouldn't know what to say. Like, man.
Hey, Mike asked, not me.
Do you know how long it's been since the Saints have sucked this bad? It's been a long time. Even these 7-9 seasons that Sean Payton has accumulated over the years, I think he had about 4 or 5 of them in his years in New Orleans, 7-9 seasons. They were never nearly as bad as this season has been. This season has brought me back to the Stone Ages of the Saints, the Jim Haslett days, when we had Aaron Brooks at quarterback.
Deuce McAllister.
My favorite wide receiver back in the day, Joe Horn. So, I mean, it brings me back to them days. It's days that I don't want to go back to. So, I mean, Dennis Allen's not going to get fired. I think he's going to get another year, but they're going to have to do something with the coaching staff. So, we'll see what happens.
And Noah, how about Arthur Smith? What do you think? I think the Falcons have overachieved record-wise this year, and I think part of that has to do with Arthur Smith. Where do you stand with him?
I'd probably agree. I think he definitely overachieved last year. The Falcons had a bottom 3 roster last year. The fact he won 7 games last year was honestly a miracle. This year, kind of the same thing. I mean, obviously, look at his career record. It's not great, but you have to look at what he's working with. I think the defense is still terrible. And look, Arthur Smith is an offensive coach. When you look at what the Falcons offense has become, considering, 3-4 years ago, they couldn't run the ball. Now they're an elite running team, but the problem is they don't have a quarterback. Their offensive line is still inconsistent. They've been trying to fix it for years. It's still an issue. To me, I think if the Falcons, first of all, they have a lot of cap space coming up in 2023, so we'll see how that use that. But if they actually had a good quarterback, with the running game that Arthur Smith has instilled, because obviously he did that in Tennessee with Derrick Henry, and some people say, well, it's Derrick Henry. Well, he's doing it now with the Falcons with a converted wide receiver and a rookie from BYU. So I think he's showing that's clearly his identity. He's done a great job doing that. But yeah, I like him. I think give him some more time. It's not going to take. It's not going to turn around multiple years of mediocrity and destruction of this team by Thomas Dimitroff and the clown Dan Quinn. It's not going to happen in just 2 years. I'd give him some more time, but yeah, I do like him. I think he just needs a bit more time to turn around this absolute calamitous organization.
I thought you were going to call them a clown show, but before we go into the remaining schedules for all four teams in the NFC South, just quickly here, the Bucs lost to the Bengals last week after leading, I think, 17-0 at one point. The Bengals came back. Joe Burrow did his thing, former LSU QB Sean. So the Bucs are now 6-8, and the Panthers, Sam Darnold finally loses as a starter this year to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Panthers are now 5-9, held to just 209 yards of total offense. And let's take a look at these remaining schedules here before we predict our division winner. And we'll start with Noah's Atlanta Falcons. At Baltimore this weekend, home against the Cardinals, home against the Bucs. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you get it there.
I think the thing, first of all, I think we can beat Arizona. I mean, Kyler Murray's out. Their team, obviously, they weren't even doing good with him. So, whether it's Colt McCoy, Trace McSorley at home, that would be a game I'd expect them to win. At Baltimore is a tough game. The only thing I would say, we don't know if Lamar's going to play, but even if Tyler Huntley does play, I mean, we just saw what this defense did against Andy Dalton. So, I'm not exactly confident either way. I'd probably expect us to lose that game. Tampa Bay, the first time we played them, it was close. It was a one-possession game. We had all the momentum. There was that roughing the passer call everyone complained about. So, I think at home we have a shot. But, I mean, let's be honest. Falcons are like 0-11 up against Tom Brady. I'm not exactly going into that game with a lot of confidence. So, I'd probably say 1-2, maybe 2-1. But it's not going to be easy. I mean, it also depends on how the quarterback play is because they've already shown they can rush for 231 yards and still lose the game.
What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Baltimore. At Baltimore, there's a probable chance that Lamar's not going to play. So you get Tyler Huntley. That's a winnable game, but they're going to have to be on their P's and Q's. The Russian attacks got to be still up to par like they've been. They're an amazing rushing team, the Falcons. Arthur Smith has done a great job with the rushing offense. They just need to get a little bit more out the quarterback position, and it's kind of why they went with Desmond Ridder to see what he has. So if he can make a couple big plays, if they got to play Tyler Huntley, contain Tyler Huntley, I think that's a winnable game. You go to Arizona. Well, you got Arizona at home. Actually, that's a definitely winnable game. That should be a win. So, but I have the Falcons losing against Baltimore, and I have them losing against Tampa. So I think they go 1-2 in this streak, finish with a record of 6-11. I think this Falcons team is almost close to where I predicted. I said 5-6 on the high side, 7 wins before the season started. A lot of people thought I was crazy. A lot of people thought this team was the worst team in the NFL. I didn't think that. I thought the Falcons were going to be a competitive team. They just need to get more guys in. They got a young core. They need to get Kyle Pitts into action, man. He's not a tight end. He's a wide receiver,
Yeah, and they haven't been competitive, but when you have 6 games where you've lost by 6 or less points, I mean, plain and simple, that's the difference between a team that's in the playoffs and a team that's on the outside looking in. They got to, address that in the coming years.
For sure. I think Atlanta has a lot of work to do, but moving on to the New Orleans Saints, Sean, your guys are at the Browns, at the Eagles, home against the Panthers. How's it ending up here?
It's not looking good, to be honest with you. I mean, I think I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we only had one road win all year, and now it's against Atlanta. So I don't see us beating Cleveland. So I mean, Andy Dalton's gonna have a rough time. I know. We've been seeing Andy being efficient. You know, anybody can be efficient if they're throwing less than 20 times a game. So I mean, look at Danny Dimes. He's living off them. 25 or less passing attempts a game, but he has been looking sharp lately. I will say that. But cold weather. You seen how it looked like when we went to Pittsburgh. I think it's going to be a similar game. I think that's going to be an L. If we can get lucky, if Philadelphia can go ahead and clinch that first seed where they just sit all their starters, maybe we'll get lucky. But I'm just going to go ahead and chalk that up as an L as well. And then I think we'll beat Carolina. I think we'll get some revenge. They're going to be looking to tank. It doesn't matter if we tank or not because, like I said, our first-round pick goes to the Eagles. So it probably – we're probably going to try to win. Carolina's probably going to try to lose because Carolina's probably going to be out of contention at that point. We'll see, though. They still have a chance. So I think the Saints will also finish 6-11, just like the Falcons.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Cleveland, first of all, they're 3-1 in their last 4 games. They're riding a bit of a hot streak. I know Watson hasn't been great since he's come back, but at some point you kind of start to expect him to get it going. And the Saints secondary, I think, is exploitable as long as they give Watson some time to throw. And like it says, it's a road game, tough weather conditions, whatnot. I would expect Cleveland to win that game, but I would not be shocked if the Saints were somehow able to squeak one out. But I'd probably expect Cleveland to win. The Eagles, I think the only shot the Saints would have in that game is if the Eagles had clinched number 1 seed and were resting anybody. Full strength, I think the Eagles win that game by 3 possessions easily. Carolina, I know they lost to the Panthers earlier, but I still think Carolina is very good. And, I think it's really hard to sweep a team around your level. And plus it's at home. And, we saw last week, I mean, what an atmosphere for a rookie to go into. That place, doesn't matter how bad the record is, still a very tough place to play. So I'd probably say 1-2 as well, probably 6-11.
Okay. And speaking of Carolina, let's get to them. So we already know playing New Orleans, you both have that as a loss for the Panthers, but they have the Lions this week, arguably the second hottest team in the NFC right now behind San Francisco, and then third if you throw Philly in, and then at Tampa Bay. So how's that ending up for Carolina, a team that, they've won a couple games here and there, but, they've performed better since the rule firing, but, it's
Yeah,
tough.
I would expect, honestly, this is a bit of a weird one because if you asked me coming to the show, I'd say, hey, the Panthers might squeak out the division because they've been doing all right recently, and plus everyone stinks kind of at the same level. But when you look at their last 3 games, these are very tough games. Detroit has won, 6 of 7, and the only game they lost was by 3 to the Buffalo Bills, who are considered by most to be a Super Bowl contender. I would expect Detroit to win that game, definitely. I think they'll be in a playoff spot by next week because I think the teams ahead of them are going to lose as well in Seattle and Washington. Tampa Bay, I know Carolina beat them earlier, but look, I'm never counting out Tom Brady. I know it's been a very hit or miss this season. I know the second half was terrible, blah, blah, blah. He's still Tom Brady. I don't expect them to go on the road in Tampa and beat them. And I already said the Saints would probably beat them, so I'd probably say 0-3, honestly, 5-12.
I 100% agree. I got them at 5-12, 0-3. Detroit is the hottest team in the league. I mean, Jared Goff, man, he's been lighting it up with the dynamic wide receivers they have. And they also got 2 dynamic running backs with Swift and Jamal Williams can crunch it down at the goal line. They got a nice looking offensive line. Dan Campbell has something brewing in Detroit. And almost things like, damn, I wish we would have him in New Orleans instead of Dennis Allen. But, it is what it is. Dan Campbell got the head coaching job long before Dennis Allen was able to take over. So, I mean, that's an L to Detroit. I think Detroit makes the playoffs if they win out. Tampa Bay, I feel like we we're about to talk about them in a sec. I feel like we are overrating them just a tad because they've been playing horrible all year. To be honest with you, they really haven't asserted any dominance like they should have. But I still think that's an L. I don't think the Panthers will have enough to beat Tampa Bay. I will be shocked if they do beat any of these teams. The only team I say that is the most beatable is the Saints. But I feel like after going 0-2 the first two games, why even try for the third game? So, I mean, especially when they're going to be looking for draft position, I know players don't tank. They're always looking for a second job, make sure, they look good on tape. But I just don't see any desire for Carolina to go 100% against New Orleans Week 18 after going 0-2 the first two games.
Yeah, I agree. 5-12 for Carolina. So by default, I mean, it's either Tampa Bay wins the division or a 6-11 team gets in the playoffs. Let's get to the Bucs and their final three games at the Cardinals, home against the Panthers, at the Falcons. By far the easiest schedule of the four teams in this division. Do we have them going 3-0 here in these final three games, or do they slip up at one point?
Well, here's what I'd say. I would expect them to go 3-0. However, because it's the NFC South this year and it's been an absolute clown show of a division, I would not be surprised if they somehow slipped up. I mean, look, on the road at Atlanta, the first game was close. I mean, you never know, but I would probably expect them to win. Obviously, they lost to Carolina earlier, and look, at Arizona, I mean, they should win that game easily. I would expect them to go 3-0, finish 9-8, which, like Sean kind of alluded to, bit of an overrated record. I think they're much worse than that. I think, hey, whichever one of these teams somehow wins the division and plays the Cowboys, man, I hope you enjoyed making the playoffs because that game's gonna be 28-0 at halftime. But yeah, I would expect them to go 3-0. Tom Brady has had some moments where he's looked like an old self. They had that miracle comeback against the Rams, and there was another one about 2 weeks ago. I can't even remember who it was.
Sean Saints.
Yeah, the Saints. So that
I
one,
don't
they
even
basically.
I don't even want to talk about that, man.
Hey,
Hey,
Sean, since it's Christmas time and we all like to cook things, what ingredient were the Saints missing in that game?
Common sense.
That's
I mean, the Saints had multiple opportunities to either control the game in those last 2 to 3 minutes of that game. We had the lead, I think it was 16-3 for 57 minutes of the game. They didn't even score a touchdown for 7 minutes. 57 minutes of the game, Tampa Bay.
tough,
And it's just like we just gave it to Tom Brady. It's just like it's Tom Brady, and it's just like, okay, here you go. You can just have it. That's exactly what happened the last 3 minutes. I don't. There's so many details of what went wrong that I can't really get into because it would literally take a whole show to get into of the details that went wrong in the last 3 minutes. If they would have beat Tampa Bay right there and then, we would probably be arguing for the Saints to win the NFC South right now. That was their game to win, and they could have won that, and they could have been sitting first place right now, but they didn't.
Absolutely.
So.
It was, dare I say, it was a very Falcons-esque last 3 minutes of the game there for the Saints.
Correct. We were the Falcons that night.
I will say this about the Falcons. I think they have the best head coach in the entire division right now.
That's not saying a lot. That's
just saying, Noah.
Yeah.
You never know. I think the Bucs will go 3-0 and get in, but I wouldn't be shocked if they slipped up to Carolina again. I don't see them losing the last week. I don't see them losing this week. I think Carolina is their most vulnerable matchup left because they already lost to them once. So,
well, I think if they're going to slip up, it'll be one of the away games. It'll be either Arizona or Falcons. They're 2-4 on the road. I think the only 2 wins they got was against the Cowboys, surprisingly, which was so early in the year. I think it was the first week of the season.
Week 1?
Yeah. So they play the Cowboys right now. They get demolished, in my opinion. So, I mean, I'm trying to look at the other team they beat away. I can't really find it,
Oh,
but I mean they're
man.
2-4, so I mean I think they'll either, if they're going to slip up, they're either going to lose to the Cardinals or the Falcons. But the Buccaneers should be expected to go 3-0 because this is a very 3-0 rest of the schedule for them.
Well, before we let you go, Sean, we have a comment from Brian McArdle, a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan from Florida. He says, Bucs slipping up is not a matter of if, but when and how many times.
Great comment from the Florida man there.
A man from Florida. Thank you for the comment, Brian. Look, I think it'll happen in the playoffs, but that's an interesting way to wrap that up. Sean, before we let you go, where can people find you and your work at Off the Dome Sports?
So you can find Off the Dome Sports on pretty much on every social media platform: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, even on TikTok, even though I don't post on there as much. I've been doing shows lately. I've been busy. I've been working a lot. That's all I've been doing. I do have a new co-host I've been working with. He's great. I call him Teddy G. But you could also just find me on my regular social media, just Sean Militello. You could probably just look up Sean Militello and I'll pop up on anything. Yeah. So I mean, and I'll follow back. If you follow me, I'll follow back for sure. So that's how I roll.
Sean, thank you so much, and quick shout out to you for attending the Alabama upset game this year for Brian Kelly. Just want to shout you out there.
It was so great, man. It was one of the greatest games in like every football game I've ever been to. That's been the greatest.
Hey, Sean, what about that SEC championship game? How'd that go for you?
You know, if it wasn't for, the blocked field goal and them not knowing, I mean, we probably could have had a chance.
We just opened up a can of worms.
We'll be back next year. That's all I get to say. You seen the transfer portal today?
Oh, I've been keeping attention, yeah.
This show needs to happen again with little Georgia LSU talk next time we get you on, Sean.
Absolutely. I'd love that.
It's funny because Georgia fans weren't really saying this back in 2019 when Icy Joe, man.
Oh, here we go.
Lighting it up in the Georgia Dome,
I try to block out that game because I knew it was over before kickoff. But hey, that's kind of what happened to you guys this year, man.
The cake was hot and steamy, we'll say.
50 burger on Tom's boy Brian Kelly's head.
And you know what's crazy is I think we threw like almost 500 yards of passing that game, which is crazy. And we get
Sean has a clip of me analyzing Brian Kelly from late last year when he was hired, Noah. And I think you've watched that clip before. But, folks, if you haven't watched that clip again, it's on my Facebook page. It's on Sean's page, too, off the dome. So check out my thoughts on how Brian Kelly's identity of a football team goes.
Check out the ingredients, man. Yes. There's always a ingredient in every recipe, including a cake, right?
That's right.
It's true.
That's right. And that's what makes the cake taste so great. But Sean,
exactly.
Speaking of great, we wish you a great night, a great holiday, a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and we will talk to you very soon. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Sean.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me on. Happy holidays. Y'all have a good one.
Sean.
You too.
Later.
All right.